The first thing they noticed wasn't the blood. It was the silence. A silence so complete, so deliberate, it felt staged, as if the room itself had decided to stop breathing. Detective Aaron Hale stood at the threshold, eyes scanning not for what was there, but for what was missing. No signs of struggle. No overturned furniture. No panic. Just precision. The victim lay at the center of it all, arranged, not collapsed. That detail mattered. Whoever did this, Aaron muttered, stepping carefully inside, wasn't in a rush. This wasn't rage. Rage was messy, impulsive, chaotic. This was something else. Something colder. Controlled. Behind every brutal act, Aaron believed, there was a story, not of the victim, but of the mind that committed it. And this scene told him one thing clearly: the killer wasn't driven by emotion alone. This was intention shaped by psychology. The walls were bare, but the absence of personal items struck him. No photographs. No clutter. A life erased before it was ended. That suggested premeditation, not just of the act, but of the narrative the killer wanted to leave behind. Control. That was the key word. Criminal psychologists often spoke about the illusion of power. Individuals who feel insignificant or invisible sometimes construct elaborate scenarios where they dictate every outcome. This crime scene reeked of that need. Aaron crouched near the victim, noticing the positioning of the hands. Not defensive. Not pleading. Almost composed. The victim had either trusted the killer, or never saw them as a threat. That meant familiarity. Someone they knew, Aaron said quietly. But familiarity alone didn't explain brutality. The wounds, though methodical, were excessive, far beyond what was necessary. That pointed to something deeper, suppressed resentment, perhaps even a long-standing psychological fixation. The killer hadn't just ended a life. They had expressed something. The question was, what? As the forensic team began their work, Aaron stepped back, already building the psychological framework in his mind. The scene wasn't just evidence. It was communication. And the killer had spoken clearly. I am in control now. Patterns don't begin at the crime scene. They begin in the mind, long before action. Dr. Lena Cross, a criminal psychologist, sat across from Aaron in the dim briefing room, flipping through the case file. She wasn't looking for evidence. She was looking for meaning. This isn't about anger, she said. It's about identity. Aaron leaned back. Explain. Lena tapped the image of the crime scene. The organization, the lack of chaos, the symbolic staging. This is someone constructing a narrative. They're not just committing a crime. They're performing it. She explained how certain offenders develop what psychologists call a compensatory fantasy. When reality fails to provide validation, the individual creates an alternate psychological framework, one where they hold power, control, and significance. Eventually, Lena said, fantasy isn't enough. They need to act it out. That's when fantasy becomes violence. The brutality wasn't random. It was expressive. Each act carried psychological weight, possibly tied to past experiences, unresolved trauma, or perceived injustices. Think about someone who felt powerless for years, Lena continued. Ignored. Humiliated. Invisible. Now imagine they find a way to reverse that dynamic. Aaron nodded slowly. They choose someone who represents that feeling. Exactly. The victim wasn't just a person. They were a symbol. And that made the crime personal, not necessarily in a direct relationship sense, but psychologically. The killer projected something onto the victim, an identity, a role in their internal narrative. What about the calmness? Aaron asked. That's the most dangerous part, Lena replied. It means they've rehearsed this mentally. Over and over. By the time they act, it feels justified, even necessary. In their mind, it isn't a crime. It's resolution. That's what separates impulsive offenders from organized ones. The latter operate with a disturbing clarity. They plan, they execute, and most importantly, they believe in what they're doing. Aaron stared at the file again, seeing it differently now. Not as a case, but as a psychological puzzle. So what are we looking for? He asked. Lena didn't hesitate. Someone who feels unseen, but desperately wants to be remembered. Evan Mercer didn't look like a killer. That was the first thing everyone said. He was quiet, polite, almost forgettable. The kind of person who blended into the background so completely that you'd struggle to recall his face moments after seeing it. But invisibility, Aaron knew, could be dangerous. People like him, Lena said as they reviewed Evan's history, don't explode. They erode. Evan's life was a pattern of quiet disappointments. Failed relationships. Dead-end jobs. Social isolation. But none of those were crimes. What mattered was how he interpreted them. Psychology teaches that perception shapes reality. Two people can experience the same rejection. One moves on, the other internalizes it as proof of worthlessness. Over time, that belief hardens. For Evan, every setback reinforced a narrative, I don't matter. That's where the danger begins. When individuals anchor their identity in perceived insignificance, they may develop what's known as maladaptive coping mechanisms. Fantasy becomes a refuge. But not just any fantasy, one where they are powerful, respected, feared. Fear is a form of recognition, Lena explained. If they can't be valued, they'll settle for being remembered. Aaron pulled up surveillance footage. Evan entering the victim's building. Calm. Unhurried. No panic. No hesitation. He's already accepted what he's going to do, Aaron said. Lena nodded. In his mind, this isn't wrong. It's necessary. That was the most chilling part. Criminals like Evan don't see themselves as villains. They see themselves as protagonists, correcting a world that wronged them. The brutality of the act wasn't just violence. It was expression. Each movement, each decision, was a statement. You will see me now. Aaron watched the footage again, this time focusing not on what Evan did, but how he moved. Controlled. Intentional. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was the culmination of a psychological journey.
Evan didn't resist arrest. He sat calmly in the interrogation room, hands folded, eyes steady. No fear. No remorse. Just stillness. Aaron had seen this before. Not in every criminal, but in the ones who believed they were justified. Do you know why you're here? Aaron asked. Evan nodded. Because you finally noticed. That answer lingered. It wasn't denial. It wasn't confusion. It was confirmation. Lena watched from behind the glass, noting his posture, his tone. He's not hiding, she said. He wants to explain. Aaron leaned forward. Why did you do it? Evan tilted his head slightly, as if considering how to simplify something complex. Because no one listens, he said. No one sees. You go through life, invisible. Like you don't exist. And then one day you realize, there's only one way to change that. Aaron didn't interrupt. This was the psychology unfolding in real time. Evan continued, it's not about hurting someone. It's about being acknowledged. There it was. Not hatred. Not even revenge. Recognition. Lena's earlier words echoed, if they can't be valued, they'll settle for being remembered. Aaron studied him carefully. You think this makes you important? Evan met his gaze. It makes me real. That was the tragedy. Not just the crime, but the mind behind it. A person so disconnected from healthy validation that they redefined existence through violence. Understanding that didn't excuse the act. But it explained it. And in criminal psychology, explanation is power. Not to justify, but to prevent. As Evan was led away, Aaron stood in silence, reflecting on the case. The brutality wasn't the mystery anymore. The psychology was. Because the scariest truth wasn't that monsters exist. It was that they are made, slowly, quietly, and often unnoticed, until it's too late.